So the first section is around visibility and accessibility. Fair to say, the biggest response that I get, not only during my usual work as commissioner out in the community, but also during the PCC elections, was about visibility and the accessibility of police officers in our communities. We talk a lot about record numbers of police officers. Some 2,500 of them. I have tended not to try and focus on police officers because 2,500 police officers sounds a lot, but also doesn't sound very many, doesn't it? And I know it's the most we've ever had, but if people don't feel the benefit, then the number becomes irrelevant, doesn't it? And part of one of the things I wanted to touch on, Alex, was around a resident in Evesham said that there isn't a local Bobby on the beat, anyone to talk to or raise local concerns around, either report it 101 or online. And I suppose I just wanted to chat through a little bit about your view as chief as to how in the modern world of 2024 we support policing to be visible and accessible in our communities.
Thanks. Well, it's a really interesting and good point. And policing and society has changed massively over the last 20 years. And you can see that from the Crime Survey of England and Wales, where both in West Mercia and elsewhere, crime on the streets has gone down. But they still have antisocial behaviour and we still have crime, whereas online and in the house, in the private dwelling, crime has gone up. So things like computer misuse, hacking, fraud, domestic abuse, and how we police those has changed as well. So, back when Richard and I were young officers, we were much less concerned about risk. We dealt with what's in front of us. Now we think about, okay, how do I prevent what's just happened in this private dwelling happening again to protect the children or protect the person who's been subject to violence. So with all those challenges, we need to understand what's the most effective way to police. And indeed, having a Bobby on the beat is hugely valuable for reassurance, as the gentleman said, to ask questions, but also for deterring crime. So if there's antisocial behaviour taking place, if there's drug use taking place, or if there's burglary or theft taking place in the immediate vicinity of that beat officer, it's unlikely to happen. And if it does happen, the officer can do something about it. For that reason, we have neighbourhood teams. So I encourage this Evesham resident to go online to look at their neighbourhood team. They will see the beat officers who are attached to that area and the PCSOs. And we regularly, Commissioner, don't we, have conversations around how we red circle those officers to not always have to respond to calls for service so that they can be as visible as possible. But if we just had officers on foot patrol, those 2,500 officers, our ability to deal with cybercrime, crimes in action, domestic abuse in the home, protecting children would be severely diminished. So it's always a balance. And that's what we continually strive to strike. The final point I'd say is, we want to put the oil where the squeak is, so we put the beat officer where they're most likely to deter crime, but also offer reassurance.
So I think visibility in 2024, exactly that balance between being purposeful and also that reassuring element. How, over the next 4 years, Alex, do you think some of the things, what are some of the things that we can do or potentially can be doing in terms of operationalizing that intent to be more visible? What are the kind of things you would like to see developed over these next couple of years to improve this as an outcome? Because I agree with you, visibility now is as much online as it is feeling safe online as it is in our public spaces.
Yeah, so I think there's a number of things we aspire to do. And when you think about visibility, where do people gather the most, where they see officers the most? And it's actually where there's also the greatest need from a crime point of view. And so we think about town centres. We might talk about that in a minute. But if we can have officers in town centres at peak time, both offering a reassurance, but also offering the deterrence. And then in the online space, recently, and we are massively embracing Facebook as a medium through engaging with communities. Yes, there's some presence on Snap and a bit on X, but we know most communities use Facebook and there can be that interaction. So working with our comms team, we're working particularly hard in that area. And then some of the advice we can give in relation to online crime is also through that medium as well.
So we've talked a bit about visibility, and over the next 4 years, do you think it is possible, from what we know now, and I know things might change, who predicted the pandemic type thing, but do you think with the way the organisation is heading, and with my political priority that visibility will increase, do you think there are steps that we can now take to increase visibility?
Yes, I do. And Rich, come in wherever you need. But one of the things I really want to do, because I've got officers out and police staff out, let's not forget police community support officers, our police staff colleagues who are the most visible in the organisation. They're out, they might walk down someone's street and you might not see them, but they've been on the street. And so we need to do something to say, how does that street know that I've been here? How do we advertise it on Facebook? How do we put leaflets out? And how do we amplify the message of our presence, which has a reassuring message, but also a deterrent message? So I think it is possible to influence people's perceptions of how visible policing has been.
So one of the things we've just touched on was around officers being embedded into their communities, and what that means in 2024 is up for debate, isn't it, in terms of how you are in communities. Over these next 4 years, just talk a little bit around what are the possibilities around how that sense of them being embedded in that community could manifest itself. The political language is putting policing back at the heart of the community, or working with the community. How do you think it's likely to manifest itself, and how the expectation of the perhaps untrue history of police officers on every corner clipping urchins around the ear rolls, because that's never going to be the case, and I don't think it probably ever was the case. But how does that, do you think, will manifest itself, or could manifest itself?
Yeah, the stories of the Dixon of Doc Green era are always quite interesting, aren't they? And society has changed considerably, and policing, I think, has improved considerably since the 60s. Certainly, I speak to some of my colleagues who worked in the 60s, and they would talk about different standards, different levels of racism, for example. And so we're always making changes there. But the majority of our staff are embedded in communities. When we think about our patrol function, our response function, they're largely brigaded locally in constituencies. And the whole point is they know the territory very well. And when you need the police, you phone up and you get them coming quickly. And the reason why they come quickly is because they are local and they know the roads, and they often know some of the offenders and some of the repeat victims, and they can do a good level of service. But that does necessitate them getting somewhere quick, because when you want the police there quick, you don't want them to be walking, do you? But also, it doesn't give a chance for you to build those long-term, lasting relationships, for example, with a retailer or with neighbourhood watch communities. They're the people who've got the time to sit and have a cup of tea with you. And that's where our beat officers and our PCSOs are hugely important. And we're very keen to ensure they are local, they know the streets, they know the key communities in there, they communicate both physically and on Facebook. And I know certainly yourself, Commissioner, you've got a desire to build that capacity even further over the next 4 years, and how we do that is absolutely key.